welcome to the very first episode of Hey Balers and Holy Rollers. I am your host, Jeremy Farley, and we are excited to be launching this podcast. In the weeks ahead, we have some very fascinating interviews lined up. NHRA Funny Car Champion Matt Hagan is going to be joining us pretty soon, as well as former U.S. Senator and Virginia Governor George Allen. A whole lot of other fascinating individuals that I think you would love to hear from. What we're going to do is just focus on having ordinary conversations with interesting people that have great stories to share. But before we get to those, I want to begin this whole podcast off, episode 1, with a conversation I've had with my grandmother. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you find her stories to be as entertaining as I do. Thank you so much. Hit the subscribe button, and we appreciate so very much you listening. What was life like growing up in the 1940s?
It was wonderful. That truthfully, we were in a neighborhood that it was safe. Just like you read about people talk about the good old days, if you want to call them that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They really were, because you could stay out like late at night and not have no fears. We've run up and down those roads late at night hunting lightning bugs, and it was great. It was good. Anyway, we had a house full of company, and so my dad, by then, she was old enough to sit in the high chair, which I always sat in the high chair. They put the thing back. I didn't use the tray, but it's where I could be up, high at the table. But anyway, she had gotten up to the age, I guess she took over the high chair. So my dad looks at me and tells me to go outside and play. And I'm like, what? I had never been made to wait to eat before. Back in the day, they made the kids go play and the adults ate first. So anyway, I'm sitting out there beside our house, digging in the dirt, snotting and crying. So I probably had mud and snot and tears. And this old lady come by that lived up around the court from us. And she said, honey, what's the matter? And I said, I'm hungry. She said, you're hungry? And I said, yeah. She said, well, can't you eat? And I said, no, my dad wouldn't let me. I said, he made me come outside. And she said, well, what are they doing? I said, they're in there eating. So she took me to her house. And Lord, she gave me ice cream and cookies.
Did you know the woman?
I had seen her, but I didn't really know her. But I do now. To this day, I remember her name is Miss McNeely. And after that, whenever she'd see me, she'd say, honey, are you hungry? And I'd say, yeah. She'd always take me to her house and give me goodies.
Did you not tell your parents or anything that you were going to her house?
Honey, no. No, not till you. Well, yeah, I would tell them I was going to her house, but I didn't tell them, the whole story and all. But after I grew up, I seen her in church one day, and I thought, oh my gosh, wonder if she remembers me. But I told my mom and dad, I was grown and had kids. I guess when I finally told them, Mom was like, oh my word, it's a wonder we hadn't been arrested. But yeah, I could just see me in my mind out there digging in that dirt, and I bet I was nasty and snotting and crying. Oh Lord. But I didn't understand, I thought I was being punished.
So that was
I think I was a little bit spoiled.
Yeah.
Because I was like 4 years old. Us first 5 is almost like 2 years between each of us.
Yeah.
So I was a baby for 4 years before Carolyn was born. Like I said, I can remember being rocked. and I'm sure I must have been up a big old youngin'. And I can remember being rocked after they brought Carolyn home. So I was 4 years old. Yeah, I think I was a little bit spoiled.
That's wild.
Yeah, yeah. I had a good life though. I even though I was born during the war, bits and pieces of that sometimes comes to my head. Like I can remember the green shades that were up at the windows,
Yeah.
and that alarm would go off, that siren thing, and you'd have to turn out all your lights and pull down those green shades. And um, I can remember after the war, maybe a year or so, anyway, listening to the radio, and something was said, and somebody said something about we might have another war or something like that. And I remember going hysterical. So apparently, a lot of it had really affected me that they weren't aware of, or that I wasn't even aware of. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Y-
Because just hearing that terrified me to the point that, I went hysterical crying and everything. I'm like, I don't want another war. I don't want another war. So, yeah,
I think
pretty bad.
it's neat the way you said, like, your dad would have to go out and make sure
Oh
that.
yeah, he was he didn't have to go fight the war because he worked at the milk dairy.
Mhm.
And I'm assuming that that's why they left the farm here in North Carolina, and I guess during the war things weren't all that great, so that's when they moved to Virginia. And then he got a job at the Bayville Farms. It was a dairy farm, a big, huge dairy farm, and that's where he was actually working. So they needed that job was essential for him, for the
Mhm.
country. So anyway, but he was what they called uh, some type of a police, air raid police. And he had a band, and it seems like I can remember that band thing, but he would have to put that on his arm, and when the sirens would go out, and we'd have to do all that and hunker down, and he would go out, and he would have to stop cars on the roads and make them pull over and turn the lights out and all that good stuff. Yeah. So apparently a lot of that stayed with me. I wasn't really aware of it, but in my brain and my subconscious, how it really was, affected me, I guess.
That's really amazing.
Yeah, it is. It is. Like I said, you don't really know how much a child is comprehending. And like I said, to really say that I can remember, I'm not real sure. Just like my grandmother, I, I was 4 when she passed, but I cannot conjure up in my brain that woman at all,
Yeah.
except laying in her casket. And I wished I could because I never had a grandmother, and um, I always thought anybody that had a grandmother was the luckiest person in the world. Of course, I love my grandpas, but especially my mom's mom. Oh my gosh, he was the most humble, gentle human being, just like my mom was just like him. He was just a wonderful man. For my dad's dad, he was a grump. Whew, was he ever? I loved him, but it was a love hate type of a thing for him. You know what I mean?
You,
He didn't like me all that well because I couldn't sit still long enough for him to like me. Now he loved Carolyn. Carolyn would sit there for hours, and he would read and read, but I would sit there 15 minutes, and I had to get up and do a cartwheel or walk on my hands or do a back bend. I had to move. I couldn't stand that sitting like that. No. Uh,
he didn't. He didn't like you for having to do your
oh
cartwheels.
no. Oh, he didn't like me. And then he'd have us sing sometimes. Well, I'd get tickled and laugh. That's just the personality that I said nowadays I would have been like put on Ritalin, I guess. But I was just a normal, active child, is really all that I was.
Yeah.
And but no, he didn't care for me, and he hated bubble gum. Oh my goodness, and that was my thrill. You could get like two pieces of bubble gum for a penny back then. And boy, I'd get both of them and stick in my mouth, and I would blow huge big bubbles. Oh, I loved it. I loved it. And he hated it. He hated it. And he'd say, if you want that gum, you keep it in your mouth. Well, this one day, I had sat there and I had worked. I had worked on this beautiful, beautiful bubble gum bubble. I mean, that thing was huge. And I mean, I had to sit there, really do it good. And he walked past me, Jeremy, and he slapped me. He slapped my bubble. It went all over my face. It got in my eyelashes and my hair and everything. I told you if you wanted that, keep it in your mouth. Now, my mom, I never heard mom talk ugly to him or nothing, but I'm going to tell you something. That day, she was trying to get that. If he could have heard what I heard, he would have been shocked. Mommy was laying him out. Not where he could hear it, but I could hear it.
So she
Yep,
didn't
she
like
was.
what he had done then.
And no, not one little bit. But she had respect for him. That was, my dad's dad. And she had respect, well, for my dad, plus, that being his dad. But under her breath, I heard it all. And it wasn't nice. We weren't rich. I guess we were poor, but we didn't even know that. You know what I mean?
Right. You were like
Uh,
everybody else around.
yeah, like everybody else around. Yeah, we my dad, every summer he planted a huge big garden with potatoes and all that good stuff. But I can remember him making us woo. I guess he maybe didn't believe in the poison or couldn't afford it. I don't know the case, but anyway, potatoes gets bugs on them, and he would make us kids walk up and down them rows picking them bugs. And Lord, I hated bugs. I was terrified of but we'd have to pick bugs off the potatoes.
Matt, what would
It
you
was
do with the
horrible.
bugs?
Um, I don't know if we put them down in a thing of water. I can't remember. I remember we had to pick them off and put them into something. I
So
don't know what we did with
you'd
them
have to
then.
like pick them off with your fingers then.
Yes, you'd have to touch them, but you knew you better do it. You know what I mean?
Was this the bugs that they're like white with like green and black stripes, I think?
Yes, I think that's them. Ugh,
They're called
nasty
potato
looking.
bugs.
Yes, that was them.
Yeah.
Yep, and he'd make a. Like I said, I don't know if it's because he couldn't afford the thing or if he chose to not put poison on our food. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't really know why, but
People,
oh my gosh, honey, he every year he had a huge, big garden. I mean, big garden. And my mother would can up, and we'd have canned tomatoes and beans and stuff to do all winter. And then the potatoes we kept down in the basement. I hated going in that basement. Ooh, it was scary to me because of spiders, but but sometimes you'd have to go down there and go down there and get me some potatoes. But growing up, I think about now, it makes me even cry. Yeah, my poor old mommy, God love her. My mom was a hard-working woman. She never had life easy. But, being a child, you don't even think about stuff like that. I do now. Like I said, it breaks my heart that I was selfish the way that I was. But I remember one time I come in from school and mom never made you do anything, really. Daddy did, but mom didn't. um, she said, Ann, she said, you want to empty this back then. She had the wringer type of washing machine. You had like tubs of water that you had to wring them through a wringer and it go into a big tub. Anyway, it took a lot, a lot of time, and it was hard work, really, just one wash a day. And she'd wash one day and then iron the next day because everything you had back then was cotton, and cotton wrinkles real bad. And we like going to school, girls were not allowed to wear pants at all. We had to wear little dresses, so she'd have to iron all them. So she'd wash all day one day and iron all day the next day, and then the next day or 2 days later she'd have to wash again because we were a big family. So anyway, this particular day that I guess, bless her heart, she probably just wore out, just plumb wore out. And I said, she said, Ann, said you want to empty this wash machine for me? And I'm like, eh. She said, there might be some money in it. Said, I believe somebody had some money in their pocket and it fell in there. And I'm like, oh, okay. Ain't that awful? I think about it now. And sure enough, when I got down to the bottom, all the water out of it, there was a dime. Well, I thought I'd done and died and went to heaven. A dime, a whole dime. Or you can go to the store and get back then, Hoskins, he run a little country store like thing. You could go in there and he had these little bags, little candy bags that were probably about 6 inches. But for 10 cents, that thing could be filled up. You can imagine the bubble gum I could have got for that. Yeah, that's what I would do. I'd run down there and me and Mary get us some candy. But yeah, that makes me feel bad that, I think about it now and how she must have been so tired doing all that and then have to cook. My greatest thrill was, kids are always hungry when you get home from school, but she would have a big old pot of lima beans, and old dried lima beans. Lord, I loved them. Still do to this day. That was that was a thrill for come home from school and her to have that. Of course, we always had dinner when Dad got home. That was one thing growing up. You could play. Now, my mother never made you eat. She never made you eat breakfast. She fixed it. If you wanted to eat it, it was there. And you go out and play all day long. And she never like made you come in. She didn't act like you was going to die if you didn't come in and eat lunch. And but you better jolly well be home before my dad got home at 5:30. You better be home, washed up and ready to eat, because we all sat down every night. Mom had it was always a table full of food, but they didn't make you eat nothing. You ate what you wanted and what you liked.
It
But
I think being a woman in those days, like a mom and a wife, that was probably the hardest job around.
oh, honey, yes, absolutely it was. My mother never worked outside after her and Dad married at all. Now, from what I have gathered growing up, my mother was kind of a caretaker even way back then, and she would go and sit with sick people, as a young girl, even, and wait on them and cook for them and stuff like that. So I think she's always been kind of like a caretaker type of person.
Yeah.
And so that never changed. But like I said, she never worked outside of the home. But honey, yeah, she worked, believe you me, from daylight to dark and then some. Yep, she sure did. Like I said, that was hard. And when we first moved into the house, she didn't even have the wringer washer. I'm trying to, oh, for about a couple of months, we didn't even have our water in the house yet. That's right. I'm remembering now that we had a pump. Dad had put a hand pump. Do you know what I'm talking about when I
Yeah.
say hand pump? Okay. He had put one of them out. And I remember Mom. pumping water and washing clothes on a scrub board.
This is those pumps that you've got to manually push up and down.
Exactly, yeah, yeah. And you'd have to like prime it, if you know what I'm talking about. You ever dump a little bit of water in it sometimes in the morning to get it going?
You think you
I
could get one working today?
don't know. I don't know. But yeah, I can remember when most of my relatives, that's all that they had in their house.
Yeah,
Um, Even my grandpa, my mom's dad,
yeah.
yeah, that's what he had. Every Sunday, Mom made banana pudding in that, put it in that big old bowl. It was a huge, big bowl of banana pudding. And then when we were in school every morning during the winter, she would make hot chocolate and put in that big bowl with a dipper in it for us to have before we went out to go to school.
Every morning.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. She would, yeah, Mom got up and cooked for you. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, like I said, if you ate, okay. If you didn't, she'd make us oatmeal and eggs and yeah.
She sounds like she just waited on her family.
Oh, she did. And I'm gonna tell you something, honey. My dad was for life. Everything my mother, that's why I never learned how to cook. My mother let you help in the kitchen, but when it came down to the cooking, she was all about my dad being pleased. She wasn't going to take a chance on one of us messing up. Oh yeah, she was all about my daddy, honey.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And I guess a lot of that was just the era and the way things were then.
Yes, it was. It
Uh,
was. That's what women did back then. They stayed home, they cleaned house, they cooked for their family, they made quilts, they patched clothes. Back in that day, I said that's why there were so many buttons. She we You wore your clothes till they wore out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So once they wore out and there was no fixing them, then she'd take all the buttons off. Because in case she sewed or you lost a button or you need a button or you made a dress and you need buttons, that sort of thing.
So buttons were recycled time and time again
Oh
then.
yeah, oh yeah, absolutely, yeah,
What were they
yeah.
made out of?
Different things. So
Well, you were blessed with a good family.
I was very blessed, yeah. And I guess I was around 8 or 9 when my dad got saved,
Okay, and that
and I remember that very well. He had, of course, I always went to church with Iris. Iris always was a church goer, and even before we moved to Glen Rock, when we lived in Broad Creek in the project, she always took me. She always took me to church. I was always with her at church, but so she started going to church because she had befriended this girl that lived out there, who was actually dating the preacher's son, Preacher Belvin's son. So he would come and pick Jane up, and so Jane invited Iris to start going, and so of course Iris always drug me along. It's kind of like Maddie and Marie. You know
yeah,
what I'm saying? That's kind of the way it was. Iris was like my second mommy, basically.
yeah.
She did everything for me, and um, I said that's why I'm prissy as I am, because I can remember growing up, and she'd say, "You're not going out of this house till you comb your hair," and I'd be like, "Well, I'm just going to the mailbox." She said, "I don't care. You don't go out of this house till you comb your hair," and. So, and she was always like rolling my hair, and she was just real motherly, making sure that I looked good. So,
So you
but
had two
anyway,
mamas.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, she she had started going to church, and they were having a revival, and Preacher Hall from Newport News was holding a revival, and so Daddy, she invited Daddy, and he went. Got saved that night. The whole family went up to the altar. The whole altar was filled up with my family. So that was a that was a wonderful experience. I got baptized the same day my dad did
Mm.
in uh, James River. Yep,
I guess there was a
sure
big
did.
change at your house after that.
Oh, big change. Of course, my dad was always a good man. Don't get me wrong. You know, he didn't thump and beat you and curse, and I never heard cursing. Um, that's why I didn't know what it was when my brother made me cuss that day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I had to eat soap because my brother, I'd never heard, damn it.
But your brother made sure you got to learn it.
Oh, he made sure. He said, now, when you miss this ball, he was throwing a ball to me. He come whispered in my ear. He said, this was Buddy, my oldest brother. He said, now, when you miss that ball, said, you say, damn it. And I'm like, oh, okay. Of course, he made sure I missed the ball. So I said it real soft, like he did, you know. I said, damn it. So he comes and whispers in my ear again. He said, if you miss it again, say it real loud, scream it. And so he made sure I missed the ball. So I screamed it out as loud as I could. Well, Daddy was right there in the bedroom. The window was up. Back then, you didn't have no air conditioning, or we didn't even have a fan. You just suffered. But anyway, his window was up, and he's like, Ann, you get in here right now. So I went in there. He said, you get in that bathroom, said, you wash that mouth out with soap. And at that point, I didn't even really know why, you know,
Yeah.
like, what, why are you making me eat soap? You don't say words like that. So then I learned. Right now, I can still taste, just talking about it, I can taste that soap. So that's why I don't say dirty words. He washed them dirty words right out of my mouth. Thank the Lord.
Were you mad at your brother?
I should have been, but I wasn't. But I just didn't understand why he wanted me to get in trouble. But I sure did. I got in trouble. But yeah, I had a good life growing up, son. Truly, I did. You know, I can't think of any bad.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I had some things in my life that was not real good, but um,
All in all, you were
oh
blessed.
yeah, as far as my mom and dad, yeah, I was very blessed, very blessed. Sure was.
Well, we're blessed by you. And that concludes the very first episode of Hay Balers and Holy Rollers, an interview I had with my grandmother about growing up in the 1940s. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. In the days ahead, we have some exciting interviews lined up with people like U.S. Senator George Allen, former Virginia governor and U.S. Senator, as well as Matt Hagan, NHRA Funny Car champion. We are excited about these conversations, and the overall goal of this podcast is just to have exciting and fun conversations with interesting individuals. Hit the subscribe button and follow along as we journey in great conversations. Thank you.